Welcome to the debate. Imagine spending, I don't know, 6 months rigorously dedicated to a language app.
Right, we've all been there.
Exactly. You've got a 100-day streak. You've memorized 1,000 vocabulary words. You understand the grammar rules perfectly on your screen. And then you step off a plane in Tokyo or Paris or Buenos Aires.
And panic sets in.
Total panic. A local asks you a simple everyday question, and your mind just goes completely blank. You freeze.
Yeah, it's the ultimate frustration for literally any learner, and I think it perfectly highlights that huge cognitive gap between knowing a language conceptually and actually deploying it under pressure.
Exactly. And that's what we're diving into today, because we are currently living through this really profound evolution in language learning methodologies. On one side of the spectrum, we have unprecedented access to native speakers globally.
These digital platforms.
Right, but on the other side, we have highly sophisticated, mathematically precise, AI-driven, systematic tools right in our pockets. Which brings us to the central question of our discussion. What is the optimal foundation for achieving true fluency in a second language?
It's such a fascinating question because it requires us to look really deeply at both human psychology and, well, the actual mechanics of information processing. And we have an incredible wealth of source material to draw from today.
We really do.
We're looking at the latest 2025 academic research on AI-mediated learning and foreign language anxiety, plus pedagogical frameworks like the Oxford Guide to English Grammar and real-world data from immersion platforms like italki.
And to establish our positions right out of the gate here, I will be arguing that authentic human conversation and contextual immersion are the irreplaceable foundations of true fluency from day one.
Bold claim.
I stand by it. Language is fundamentally a social contract. Delaying human interaction in favor of automated study actually stunts a learner's progress. Because, true fluency requires the unpredictability of natural dialogue to build those necessary cognitive pathways.
Well, and I will argue that throwing beginners into immediate human conversation is, frankly, not only inefficient, it is psychologically paralyzing.
Paralyzing?
Absolutely. Systematic, technology-driven instruction, utilizing AI for judgment-free practice, and the mathematical efficiency of targeted vocabulary and grammar, that provides a superior and absolutely necessary cognitive scaffolding. I mean, you have to build the architecture before you can inhabit the building.
Right, but if you never invite anyone into the building, it's just an empty shell. Let's look at the emotional reality of the learner. Because I think that freeze response we talked about at the airport, that is exactly where your AI-first approach falls completely short.
Actually, I'd say that freeze response is precisely why the AI-first approach is medically and psychologically necessary.
How so?
Well, if you are listening to this, you've probably felt that exact spike of cortisol when a native speaker talks way too fast.
Oh, sure, the sweating, the racing heart.
Exactly. That is what the 2025 Mixed Methods Research classifies as foreign language anxiety, or FLA. We really have to understand the biological mechanism here. When that anxiety hits, the amygdala essentially hijacks the brain.
Right, the whole affective filter concept?
Yes, but it isn't just a poetic metaphor. It is a literal cognitive block. The brain becomes so consumed with processing fear and social threat that it stops encoding new vocabulary into working memory. You aren't learning in that moment. You are just in survival mode.
Okay, I don't deny the cortisol spike. It's real. But relying on an AI platform to alleviate that anxiety is, it's a false cure.
A false cure? It actively lowers the affective filter.
But it removes the anxiety by removing the human element entirely. It creates this completely sterile environment.
I wouldn't call it sterile. It creates a judgment-free zone. It allows for self-regulated learning, where a student can speak readily, make 100 mistakes, and not feel the crushing weight of human scrutiny.
Sure, but...
And think about the automated apps that provide gamified daily habits like Duolingo or Mondly. They utilize dopamine loops, the streaks, the immediate rewards for finishing a 5-minute lesson. They build the psychological confidence in the daily habit that is a strict prerequisite to speaking. The affective filter lowers, and cognitive encoding can actually happen.
I hear you, but building confidence in a simulation does not transfer to reality. Let's think about this in terms of cognitive load. Learning on an app is like practicing driving in a completely empty parking lot.
Which is a perfectly logical place to start driving.
To learn where the brake and the gas pedal are, sure. But human conversation isn't an empty parking lot. It is stepping onto a busy, highly unpredictable highway.
Okay, I'll follow this analogy.
When you are on the highway, the mechanics of steering and accelerating have to be entirely subconscious because your working memory, your cognitive load, is completely taken up by reacting to the unpredictable cars around you. The native speaker cutting you off, the sudden change in topic, the background noise, the slang.
Right, it's chaotic.
Exactly. And apps do not train you for highway traffic. They just keep you driving in circles around orange cones.
But wait, if you merge onto a busy highway before you even know how to use the clutch, you are going to crash. That is what forced early immersion does to a beginner.
I wouldn't call it a crash, I'd call it a learning experience.
A traumatic one. The dry land practice of an app builds the cognitive muscle memory so that when you finally do hit the highway, you aren't staring at your feet wondering which pedal is which.
You are romanticizing the messiness of human interaction, as if the chaos itself is the ultimate teacher.
The chaos is the context, and without context, the architecture you're building doesn't stick.
Well, let's actually look at that architecture, because the sheer inefficiency of learning structured through unstructured conversation is staggering to me.
Inefficient. How?
Why stumble through dozens of confusing, anxiety-inducing conversations to implicitly guess how a sentence works, when you can explicitly study the formula?
Because human brains aren't calculators. We don't acquire language by memorizing formulas. We acquire patterns. Look at the Oxford Guide to English Grammar. English relies heavily on strict word order. Because the English language lacks word endings to denote number and gender, unlike Latin or Russian, the sequence of the words is the only thing providing the meaning.
Subject, verb, object.
Exactly. The detective arrested the thief represents a completely different reality than the thief arrested the detective. A learner needs to systematically understand clause patterns.
Okay, but most native speakers don't even know what a clause pattern is, yet they speak perfectly.
Because they had 10,000 hours of childhood to absorb it. Adult learners do not have that kind of time. You have to explicitly learn the difference between, say, transitive verbs and intransitive verbs.
Oh, come on, you don't need to know the grammatical terminology to use the verb. You don't need the terminology, but you need the mechanics. You can't just say, the detective arrested. Arrested who? That verb requires an object to receive the action. That is a transitive verb. An application like LingoDeer provides structured, algorithmic grammar lessons that progress logically through these exact concepts. It teaches you the physics of the language instantly.
But knowing the physics of a bicycle doesn't mean you can ride it. I fundamentally challenge the idea that studying the definition of a transitive verb translates to active real-time usage.
It absolutely does when combined with targeted vocabulary acquisition, which is mathematically proven, by the way.
Mathematically proven?
Yes, the source material highlights the 1,000 most common words framework. The linguistic data shows that by isolating just 1,000 specific words, function words, highly common verbs, basic nouns, the Pareto principle takes effect.
The 80-20 rule.
Right?
That tiny fraction of the total lexicon yields 85% comprehension of daily texts. You systematically acquire these essential building blocks, and suddenly 85% of the highway makes sense before you even merge onto it.
Okay, but rote memorization of 1,000 isolated words fails the moment those words change context. A word's meaning flexes depending on the intonation, the speaker, and the situation.
A tree is still a tree regardless of the intonation.
But get can mean a dozen different things. The immersion literature cites study abroad research, specifically the work of Kinginger in 2011 and Cummins in 2009, which proves that highly motivated learners in immersive settings reach higher levels naturally without algorithmically optimizing their flashcards.
But they are immersed in the country.
Yes, and they do this through what we call comprehensible input. Right, but comprehensible input still requires a foundational base of vocabulary to be comprehensible in the first place. Otherwise, it's just noise.
Not necessarily. Comprehensible input means the brain is absorbing language that is just one step above its current level of understanding, but the gaps are filled in by context.
Give me an example.
The material gives a brilliant one.
reading a children's version of Gulliver's Travels. The learner might not know the exact transitive verb being used, but they understand the plot, they see the illustration, they know Gulliver is tied down. The brain decodes the new word through meaning making, not through a translated flashcard.
Reading a book is still a controlled, systematic environment. It's not a live conversation.
But the exact same mechanism happens in live conversation. When you connect with a tutor on a platform like italki, that native speaker dynamically adjusts their language to your specific cognitive load. It's called meaning negotiation.
Meaning negotiation.
Right. They watch your facial expression. If your eyes glaze over, they instantly simplify their sentence structure or use a hand gesture or substitute a simpler synonym. They scaffold the language around you in real time.
Okay, but an algorithm.
An algorithm cannot read your confusion. It just feeds you the next flashcard in the sequence, whether you deeply internalize the concept or not.
I have to strongly disagree with the premise that an algorithm is blind to your understanding. In fact, the algorithmic sequence ensures you aren't missing structural gaps that a human tutor might completely ignore.
Ignore? Why would a tutor ignore a gap?
Yes, a native speaker might dynamically adjust to your facial expressions, but they also might just let your recurring grammatical mistakes slide to keep the conversation flowing smoothly.
So you're saying human feedback is inferior to machine feedback?
In terms of precision, yes, absolutely. I champion the unparalleled accuracy of AI in pronunciation and grammar drills. Look at the material detailing tools like Elsa Speak.
Oh, the speech recognition stuff.
Highly advanced AI-powered speech recognition trained on massive acoustic data sets. When you speak into it, the AI instantly analyzes your speech formants, identifies specific phonetic errors, and provides targeted practice drills.
It isolates the symptom, not the communication breakdown.
It isolates the phoneme. You can drill a single vowel sound at your own pace until the tongue placement and breath control are mathematically perfect. It is immediate, highly detailed, diagnostic feedback.
But humans give feedback too.
A human conversationalist, even a paid tutor, will often gloss over minor phonetic errors. Why? Because stopping a conversation every 5 seconds to correct someone's vowel sound is incredibly disruptive to the social flow. It's rude.
Well, yeah.
AI doesn't care about being polite, it doesn't get tired, it gives you the exact acoustic feedback you need to physically train your vocal cords.
Okay, I will concede that Elsa Speak can mathematically correct a vowel sound with more persistence than a tired human tutor. That is technologically impressive.
Thank you.
But let's look at the critical limitations of that current AI feedback mentioned in the text. What happens when that quote-unquote perfect vowel sound makes you sound completely unnatural in the real world?
If the pronunciation is acoustically correct, it isn't unnatural.
It is if the AI only trained on standard American data. AI pronunciation tools primarily focus on centralized, homogenized accents. They struggle immensely with regional nuances.
Well, they're improving.
But right now, what if the learner is moving to Scotland or New Zealand or even just the southern United States? The AI might flag a perfectly valid, culturally rich regional pronunciation as a red error.
The data sets are constantly expanding to include regional models. That is a temporary technological hurdle, not a fundamental flaw in the methodology.
I disagree. I think it points to a fundamental flaw in how we view language. AI gives you technical accuracy. Humans give you social appropriateness. This is called pragmatics.
Pragmatics, okay.
Let's say you want someone to pass the salt at a dinner party. You could say, "Give me salt." An app might tell you that is grammatically flawless. Subject, verb, object. Perfect pronunciation.
Right, it achieves the communicative goal.
But a human tutor stops you and says, "We don't actually use that phrasing in this context because it sounds demanding and rude. You should say, 'Could you pass the salt, please?'" An AI flashes a red incorrect for a vowel sound. A native speaker corrects the social context, which stops you from offending your host.
But you can't achieve social appropriateness or pragmatics if your foundational pronunciation is so poor that the host doesn't even know you're asking for salt. The phonetic foundation has to be built first. You cannot run before you walk.
But walking isn't learned by isolating the muscles in a laboratory. Walking is learned by trying to move towards something you want.
That's a bit philosophical, don't you think?
Let's look at the actual experience of the learner detailed in the immersion material. This individual moved to Japan with absolutely zero Japanese. Did he lock himself in a room with an acoustic analysis app?
I'm assuming no.
No. He went to a local cafe as a total beginner and just sat there listening to the continuous stream of sounds people were making.
See, sitting at a cafe is a highly romanticized view of learning.
It is active auditory training. He was trying to hear the syllables, noticing the natural rhythm, trying to parse where one word ended and the next began in a continuous flow of speech. That is authentic exposure.
But he wasn't speaking.
It trains the brain's auditory processing system to handle the speed and blending of real language in a way that isolated speech recognition drills, where a machine waits patiently in silence for you to speak one perfect word, simply cannot replicate.
That cafe experience is lovely, but it is entirely passive, and more importantly, it is a massive geographic luxury.
Geographic luxury.
Yes, the 2025 research heavily emphasizes that AI democratizes access to language acquisition. It promotes self-regulated learning by providing personalized, constructive feedback and adaptive learning environments anywhere in the world.
Right. Accessibility is important.
A single mother working 2 jobs in Ohio cannot just go sit in a cafe in Tokyo or Paris to absorb the acoustic rhythms. AI allows her to self-monitor her advancement on her commute. That independence and accessibility are crucial.
I absolutely agree that technology democratizes access, but it democratizes access to a simulation of the language, not the living language itself. And, we don't need a plane ticket to get the real thing anymore.
You're bringing it back to the digital platforms.
Yes. When you converse on platforms like italki, you get that authentic exposure right from your living room. You get the spontaneous thought process of a native speaker in Bogota or Berlin. You are forced to react in real time.
Right, but again, that pressure,
That mild, manageable pressure of keeping a human connection alive in the moment is what actually wires the brain's neuroplasticity for fluency. The stakes are real because the human is real.
I am not denying that human interaction is the ultimate goal. That is why we learn languages. But the mild pressure you describe is, for millions of learners, a brick wall.
A brick wall.
Yes, the mixed method study clearly shows that without the AI integration phase, learners facing intense psychological barriers simply give up. If the anxiety prevents them from opening their mouth, your immersive communicative approach is effectively useless.
They just need the right supportive tutor.
They need a scaffold. The systematic study of the Oxford Guide's grammar rules, combined with the Pareto efficiency of the 1,000 most common words, creates that scaffold. You build the structural integrity with AI, and then once it can bear weight, you use it to interact with humans.
But the danger is that if you rely too heavily on the scaffold, you never learn to support your own cognitive weight in a real conversation. The source material specifically warns against this trap.
Warns against what? Overstudying?
Relying exclusively on free apps for months before ever trying to speak. It builds incredible passive recognition. You can read the menu perfectly, but it actively slows your spontaneous speaking progress. It isolates speaking as a drill rather than integrating it as a communicative reflex.
Confidence is entirely subjective. For many learners, true confidence doesn't come from stumbling through a chaotic conversation and hoping the tutor is kind.
Then where does it come from?
Confidence comes from knowing they possess an 85% comprehension rate of the vocabulary they are about to hear, because they studied the 1,000 words systematically. Confidence comes from fundamentally understanding the subject-verb-object architecture, so their brain isn't frantically guessing how to construct a sentence while simultaneously trying to decode the native speaker's rapid accent.
Well, it seems we are looking at 2 very different definitions of confidence. You are advocating for technical confidence. I am advocating for communicative confidence.
I think that's a fair assessment.
Let's pull this together as we wrap up our discussion. My position remains that while technology is a brilliantly accessible supplementary tool, the core engine of fluency has to be human connection and contextual immersion from the very beginning. The subtle nuances of culture, the endless variations of regional accents, and the spontaneous, unscripted thought of a native speaker just cannot be algorithmically replicated.
Yet,
Well, language is entirely a social contract. By delaying human interaction to stay in the safety of a parking lot, a learner ultimately stunts the very neural pathways required to navigate the highway.
And my position remains that prioritizing the messiness of just talking ignores the staggering cognitive load placed on a beginner, as well as the very real barrier of learner anxiety.
Right.
AI, spaced repetition algorithms, and systematic grammatical study provide an essential mathematical foundation. The 2025 research is unequivocal. AI alleviates foreign language anxiety and fosters self-regulated learning. By building that technical scaffolding first, you ensure that when the learner finally steps onto that highway, the experience is fruitful, efficient, and vastly less terrifying.
You know, we do seem to have a clear point of convergence here, despite our different starting lines.
I think we do, yeah.
Perhaps the optimal path for the modern learner involves utilizing this highly sophisticated technology to lock in vocabulary retention and structural basics in the quiet spaces between immersive, human-led conversations.
I absolutely agree with that synthesis. The human brain's ability to encode and deploy a second language is fascinatingly complex. It clearly requires both bottom-up processing, learning the rules and the sounds, and top-down processing, understanding the context and the culture.
Exactly.
The incredible tools we have today should be integrated, not treated as mutually exclusive.
Well said. There is certainly much more to explore in the source material for anyone looking to optimize their own cognitive approach. We leave you, the listener, to evaluate your own learning style based on the mechanisms we've discussed today. The next time you open a language app or book a conversation with a native speaker, ask yourself, are you going to stay comfortable analyzing the mechanics of the engine in the parking lot, or are you finally ready to merge into the unpredictable, exhilarating traffic of human conversation?